Hi there. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for the writing assignment on Tuesday. I got a lot of information from that, and the skit due date will be changed to April 27th. Hopefully that will give you some more time to prepare for that. I got some feedback that the study guide was not clear. I'll work on making that clearer and to make sure that the quiz questions are understandable. I will also make these videos available before class, and there was a complaint of having to study for a quiz that was on a different chapter than the writing assignment for that day. I'll look into changing the quiz schedule. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do that, but I will definitely see if I can do that. And then there was also some concern about the stress of writing assignment time limit. So I've addressed those on a one-on-one basis. And if you have any concerns the rest of the semester, I encourage you to let me know, because I want you to have a valuable learning experience and I want to be able to support you in your learning. So chapter 5, we're going to look at social interaction from a sociological point of view. We're going to look at impression management. We're going to see how we use impression management in our everyday life. We're going to look at social interaction theories, in particular ethnomethodology, as well as conversation analysis. So you saw on Tuesday a brief video about Erving Goffman, who is a sociologist who used drama as an analogy for sociology. And one of the terms he uses are roles, which are the behaviors of people occupying particular social positions. And these roles are determined by a status. So your textbook uses this definition for status: the social honor or prestige that a particular group is accorded by other members of society. Well, a status is not always necessarily an honor. For example, one could be an outcast. That would be a status. That would not be an honor. Or one could be a fired employee. That is probably not an honor either. So your textbook also uses the term social position. I'm going to use this term interchangeably with the word status, which I think most introductory sociology textbooks would agree with. So the social position is a status, and the status is assigned by society, what the roles are or what the expected behavior. So my status as a teacher has a role of grading papers. And yet my status of being a teacher is not only defined by my behavior, it's also defined by how I look and how others perceive me. So Erving Goffman talked a lot about impression management, and impression management is what we do to prepare for our presentation of our social role, which is determined by our status. So as a teacher, there are some expectations. One, of how I dress. I generally would not dress up in a suit as the president would. I might, but we really don't make that much money. I wouldn't show up in jeans. Well, maybe not jeans, maybe I would, but my pajamas. I wouldn't show up in my pajamas. And I would present myself maybe with a briefcase, with my markers, with my notebook. All of that gives off an impression of who I am. And when I was a student, I would go into a classroom, I would sit in my seat, I would put my books on the desk, I would have my pen. Even if I never even took any notes, I was giving off the impression that I was ready to learn, I was ready to listen, I was ready to engage in the behavior or the role that was expected of me. So how we dress is all about impression management. We are trying to either fit in or give an impression to our peers, to our superiors, to our parents, to whomever. We're giving an impression as to the role that we are going to engage in, or the behaviors that we're going to engage in that is expected of us. And these expectations are sociologically or defined by our society. So another part of this drama analogy is audience segregation. The front region is who we are performing for. So if I was a teacher, my students or my boss would be my front region. And the back region, when we're off the stage, is who we would engage with when we're not necessarily fulfilling our role or engaging in the behaviors that are expected. So if I was going to an interview, I would dress the part, dress in a suit or something of the sort, and the front region would be the people who are interviewing me. After the interview, if I called my best friend and said, "Oh, I did so bad," that would be my back region. I wasn't playing the role, I was just kind of being myself. Okay, civil inattention is another term, and these are the rules by which we acknowledge the existence of another person, but make it clear that we don't want to engage with them. So for example, if I'm walking down the hall and I pass by someone, I'll nod to them, even if I know them or not, I'll nod to them, and that makes it clear that I'm acknowledging them, but I'm not really interested in engaging in a conversation. And so if I'm getting on a bus or a train and I'm looking for a seat, and someone catches my eye and then looks away, that would be an example of civil inattention, where we acknowledge someone, but we make it clear that we're not interested in engaging. Okay, so here's the definition that's in your textbook. A very important part of social interaction is nonverbal communication, and this is what's missing in many ways that we communicate with technology, for example, email or messaging, or even on the phone. So nonverbal communication is how we use our body, how we use our facial expressions to communicate with others. And Paul Ekman studied many different cultures, and he found that regardless of the cultures, there are a few facial expressions that always communicate the same. So the smile always communicates happiness, sadness always looks the same, anger always looks the same, and disgust always looks the same. Another term is what is known as a response cry, and this is something that seems to be involuntary, but really we use it as a way to communicate with others. So if I drop something like oops or doh, we really are giving a message to somebody else. So focused and unfocused interaction. So an unfocused interaction is an interaction that occurs, but it's not as engaged as in a focused interaction. So unfocused interaction, if someone sat down next to me and then maybe I kind of turned myself to them and crossed my leg the other way, that would not be civil inattention, because I'm not really acknowledging them. I'm just kind of making it clear that I sort of want my own space here. So unfocused interaction is related to civil inattention, but they're different. Civil inattention is kind of the rules that we follow just to acknowledge someone and let them know we don't want to engage, whereas unfocused interaction, if someone came down and sat next to me, I'm not really like that would be civil inattention. I'm acknowledging them. And then unfocused interaction would be how I move and then maybe get out my phone and talk. And then if they get closer, I move away or I cross my legs the other way. That would be unfocused interaction. And then a focused interaction would be when I'm actually engaging. So if I go to the store and buy something, that would be a focused interaction between me and the cashier. And both focused and unfocused interactions are also known as encounters. When we come in contact with another human being and we have a focused encounter where we're looking at them, engaging with them, or an unfocused encounter where I'm reacting to them, perhaps. So Erving Goffman looked very carefully at social interaction and came up with the conclusion that we care very much what other people think about us, whether we want to admit that or not. And therefore, how we act and what we do is very, very much affected by others. We do have agency, which is the ability to think, to act, to make choices independently, but we most certainly are influenced by others. Edward T. Hall is another sociologist who studied personal space. And personal space is the physical distance that we maintain between ourselves and others. And he came up with 4 different types of personal space. Intimate, where we're involved in a romantic relationship, or maybe a mother and an infant. Personal space for friends or close family members. And then social space, where we are in a more formal setting, so perhaps maybe a party where we don't know everybody. And then a public distance, where we're at a grocery store or something like that. So these are the 4 different spaces, and he actually has spaces measured out based on the culture. And so Americans have specific average spaces, which are very different for those in the Middle East, where the personal space, the public space, is much closer. So this personal space is culturally defined. Harold Garfinkel, on the other hand, came up with the term ethnomethodology. And what this is the study of how people make sense of what others say and what we do in the course of our daily interaction. So for example, when we say, "Hi, how are you?" to someone, we usually really don't mean "Hi, how are you?" unless it's a very close friend or family member. Usually when we say, "Hi, how are you?" it's just an acknowledgement of that person. And really what we're saying is, are you going to engage in society? So how are you doing? I'm doing okay. Now, it is an opportunity if something's going terrible to let someone know if they're in crisis or not. But generally when we say, "How are you?" we're really not asking, "How are you?" We're just acknowledging the other person, and we're kind of both acknowledging, yes, I'm engaging in society, I'm going to follow the rules. And so that gives us a sense of comfort because we know what to expect, that this person is going to follow the rules. We get a sense of security because we know what to expect. So Harold Garfinkel looked a lot at our social interactions that weren't really what we think they would be, like "How are you?" We're not asking how people are. We're just getting a sense of security that people are engaging in the social rules or the social expectations that we have for them.